Thank you, Dr. Watson. So I'll start from here then. So my dear students, welcome to our ongoing, like now it's officially a really long series now. We've been doing this for quite some time.
Yeah.
So welcome to a long series on JavaScript for beginners. And this is session number 11. As always, every session I am packing in a lot of stuff, and I'm also sharing a lot of information in each session as well. But first, as always, a little bit of showing off about myself, Dr. Wilson. So I am a guy who's been coding since a long time. I'm officially 40 plus this month. So I've been
Mm.
coding for a long time, tutoring professionally since 2012. I got multiple Microsoft recognitions there and
Happy
MVP award.
birthday, by the way.
Sorry, Dr. Watson.
Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you, Dr. Watson. I just turned 40, so let me see what this decade of my life brings for me.
All
Thank
right.
you, sir. Yes, so as I was saying, I do have a few Microsoft recognitions and MVP award in 2014, and recently got certified in cloud and other stuff. So just upgrading myself, something I tell you guys every day. So I take my own advice. As usual, you can see my website and other things and so on. So as always, every session, what I do is I share a very updated, like a one sheet document, Dr. Watson. So this session also let me quickly upload it. And of course, I know a lot of students join slowly over time. Of course, so I'll share the document again at the end of the session as well. But for those who came early, let me share that right now, Dr. Watson. 1 second, sir. You can see my screen. Yes, sir. Yes, you
Yes,
can.
very well.
Okay. Right. I just need to get 1 second.
Reminding you, ladies and gentlemen, we are with J. Bachahally, Wada Christian Vijaya Simha. He is talking to us about JavaScript, the JavaScript frameworks. As you can remember, last time we had React and Node JavaScript, and today he is looking into some new frameworks. So it's up to you to decide which one works better for you. Jay.
Dr. Watson, 1 second, sir. I am facing
No,
for the
take your
first
time.
time
Take your time. I
a
was just
technical difficulty.
I
I prepared a PDF, but for some reason,
take your time, Prof.
I only have the Word document. I don't think Word document is appropriate for students. I wanted them to, yeah, there you go, Professor. That's the PDF coming up right now.
Okay.
It's now there, Professor, in the chat box, and I can resume my screen as well. Back in this. Okay, there you go, Professor. So let me go ahead and open the document here for the students. There we go. And it should come up on my screen. So this is really, I would say, Professor, this is an ongoing and constantly updated. You can see it right there. So updated May 4th, just yesterday, before I sent out this file to your team as well. So my dear students, you have all the essential links. A lot of times students will ask me, what about those who just came in, and what about those who want to go deeper? All the essential links are there. And most importantly, every session I do, I put a quick summary for each session right there. Like, for example, today we are jumping into a little bit of, continuing our journey into frameworks. And I'm kind of today's session, I'm finalizing the framework we are going to be using in our future sessions. So that's going to be Angular JS, but I do want to touch upon a little bit about Next.js. So like this, I do provide quick summaries of every session down, session 11, session 10. And the best part is each time I do go ahead and show a demo project, that link is also available. So keep this document handy with you. This is really like your notes for you to follow along in the session, whether you're coming in regularly or only joining once in a while or only catching up on the recordings and so on. So that's the one sheet documents. It's becoming bigger every session, obviously. So please do make the most of it. Right then, so coming back, so here we go. Now, yes, before I begin, I do mention Next.js in the title because I'm going through all the frameworks, and I just want to mention there. But going forward, as we continue our journey, we are doubling down, and ultimately I have to choose one framework, and Now, when I started it, I think I started almost like a year ago. So originally, I thought when I started it was going to be Next.js, but then the more research I did, and then of course the introduction of AI and everything, what I realized was if we're going to do front end development, I've now come to a conclusion that AngularJS is the way to go. So some amount of evolution in what I'm planning here. So there you go, folks. So this is today is like a conclusion of what we have started, like in terms of finalizing a framework. And going forward, it's going to be JavaScript with AngularJS. And I think it's going to be very, very exciting in this session. So it's like a preamble for future sessions, of course. So you will see a lot of reasons why I have chosen to go with AngularJS, although I do mention for the sake of completion Next.js at the very end of this session. Meanwhile, at the end of the session, as always, I do have a demo. It's kind of complex. Let me see if I can get it running in this session itself. Otherwise, I'll definitely show you how to run a very complex demo I have for you, and it will continue on in the next session as well. So let's begin by understanding a quick introduction to AngularJS. Now, as we mentioned in the previous sessions, there are these frameworks. Okay, now in the beginning, I talked about JavaScript, I talked about HTML, CSS, Bootstrap, and even, of course, a couple of sessions that even dedicated to how we can use AI and everything. So ultimately, we realized that if you're going to build front end applications, for yourself or for a job interview, or once you become part of a company, you need to attach yourself to at least one framework. Right now, of course, at the end of the day, like a senior developer such as myself, I usually end up working on multiple frameworks over time. I go ahead and I work on AngularJS one month, like this month, I'm working for the client, I'm working on AngularJS. Last month, like a few months ago, I was working on Next.js. Last year, again, I was working on React.js. So it's not like you end up working on only one framework, but you have to start somewhere. And so AngularJS is the one I want to start with. So this is developed by Google. Although, like most frameworks, this is open source. Now, Dr. Watson, I'm sure you're aware, sir, open source usually means that this is a community project, which means no one company owns it or anything, which means, other developers can contribute and find out how it is done. And that is a good thing because, well, that, like either you become, even if tomorrow the company stops supporting it for some reason, maybe it's not making enough money and stuff like that, the community will continue to take it over and keep supporting it. So that's one of the good things about an open source framework such as AngularJS. Now, the second thing is each framework has its own focus. With AngularJS, the focus is really about building single page application. So when we say single page application, Dr. Watson, we're really talking about any website which kind of operates like a app, but is really a website. I mean, any website today, of course, is a single page application. A simple example I can think of is like Amazon. So when you go to Amazon, it's really like an app. You can do a lot of things on the Amazon website itself, everything from shopping to payments, book the flight tickets and stuff like that. So everything you can do in that single page app. So those are the kind of things we can build with AngularJS. And of course, the demo that I will show either today or in the next session, you'll see what I'm talking about. And also, there are different ways to develop software. There are many, many different ways. Now, this AngularJS uses what is called as a declarative approach to simplify development, which means we actually use TypeScript. It's something I'll mention more as the sessions go by. I may have to give a session just on TypeScript to see what this means. And now this means that everything has been declared. It's easier to show when we jump into TypeScript, but for now, just go with me here. This specific framework uses what is called as a declarative approach. It's easier to show, so I'll go deeper into it in a future session. But the ultimate goal is the declarative approach, which we'll see in future sessions, leads to a simple development process. But here, Professor, I do want to mention something. When we talk about frameworks, We always say that this is going to simplify things, this is going to simple things and so on and so forth, but it's never really simple, sir. Any framework, any kind of programming, it really is a long learning curve. This is something I repeat every time. So when you see the word simple anywhere, what it means is it is simple compared to, say, some other way of developing web applications. So that's really what we mean here when we say simplifies development. So it might make it easier for you to deploy, it might make it easier for you to debug, but the hard work remains the same no matter which framework that you choose. So just want to add that, because sometimes I've seen students, they ask me, oh, it says simple, so is it really simple? And the answer is no, it's not really simple. So it's always the challenge. In fact, AngularJS does have a rather steep learning curve. But why I'm choosing it, I'll go into that eventually. Now, next thing is, what are the main things? Now, each framework has some key features. AngularJS obviously has its own. So now, again, some complex terms there. I'm going to try to unpack it. So first thing is two-way data binding, Dr. Watson. So here, what I want to do, sir, is I would like to use the example of, let's say, like a tennis players, who are obviously playing tennis. So the tennis ball keeps getting, hit from one end to the other end. So it's like, imagine the tennis ball is the data. So when the one side of the tennis court, we call that a back end, and then the other side, we will call that the front end. So there is like a two-way data binding. Now, what does that mean? So let's say you're trying to show let's say like you're trying to show the weather on your website. Now, the weather data would be coming in live from the back end, like a database or something. So as and when the weather data changes in the back end, when we say model there, professor, that's what we really mean. Model is database, it's a word for database. So when the database is changing, immediately the front end, that is where we show things, right? So that's where we show things, that is immediately synchronized. So that allows for dynamic views to be generated. So that's really what happens. Like when, again, using the shopping example, if you're shopping, you add something to the cart, immediately the cart gets updated with whatever you added. So if there's nothing in the cart, it becomes one. So that's what we're talking about, two-way data binding. Very important when you're building a modern web app. Second thing is dependency injection. Now, that's another complex word. I don't know if there are any .NET developers in the audience. Now, this is something, of course, I am a Microsoft technology, that's what I develop a lot. So obviously, I'm very much into .NET, even much more older .NET experience than what I have with JavaScript and everything. So again, but I'll try to unpack it in a simple way, Professor. Now, dependency injection, what it means is at the point of your software needing a specific service, it is literally injected the implementation of a service. An example is in your project, let's say you're using some kind of an authentication system. So you would use some kind of an authentication library. So what we do in dependency injection is we would have what is called as a startup file. Like that's where everything begins in a software. So we have the technology allows us to inject, that authentication library into your project at the point it starts running. And the best part about this is later, if you make improvements or if you make changes or you completely replace the library, dependency injection allows you to do that without affecting the rest of your project. That's what we mean when we say managing the life cycle of services and components. So again, fairly complex, but again, that's why I said today's session is going to be a little bit on the complex side, and we'll dig deeper into this as we start the practice code in the future sessions. Finally, Directives are really nothing but, again, in front-end development, this is very common in all the front-end frameworks. The only way to really do things is, HTML by itself cannot do anything. So there must be some kind of technology to extend the HTML. And in this case, in AngularJS, we are talking about what is called as directives, which allows you to extend the HTML. And finally, the MVVM architecture is really one of the many ways in which we have the front end. It's kind of attaches to the two-way data binding thing, where we are able to keep our MVVM, means model view model. So model is the database, V is the view, the actual thing that the customer sees, and view model is the how the data is stored on the view side of things. So M is how data is stored on the database side of things, and VM, the view model, is how the data is stored on the view side of things. And finally, you have the view in the center. So I mean, actually that is kind of a little confusing, because the M is on the left side, which is great, and the view is actually on the other side, and VM is usually in the middle. So it should actually be MVMV, but that's not very easy to market. So I believe that is where it went with MVVM. That was the word that was used. So ultimately what it allows you to do is, it allows you to separate your code into separate files, makes it easy for you to do your styling separately, makes it easy for you to do your testing separately, and keep everything in separate folders, keep your models in separate folders. So it makes for easy coding. So it's called separation of concern. Again, kind of advanced concept, but we'll go into it as we go deeper into this one. So before I go to AngularJS ecosystem, I'm going to drink some water here, Professor. If you have any questions, I will take it. But let me just grab some water, sir.
That's fine, Jay. As a matter of fact, we do have a question in the chat box from Dr. Vedastus, and this is what he asked. In some regions, there may be limited market demand for advanced web or services, leading to fewer opportunities for JavaScript developers to find employment or clients. How can this be solved?
Professor, if you want, I can keep it for the end, or I can answer it right
Oh
now. I
yeah,
don't
I
mind.
would prefer you we wait for the end. As a matter of fact, that's what
Yeah,
I
okay, Professor.
told
Yeah,
Dr.
yes,
Vidas.
Professor. That's yes, sir.
All right.
Right then. Now the next thing is, this is another criteria that I used when I sort of finalized AngularJS for the next part of the JavaScript journey, is the what is called as an ecosystem. Now, a simple example for ecosystem, Professor, is I can think of is like Professor. Do you? I'm sure you know about the Star Wars movies, if I'm not wrong.
Yes, yes, I do.
Yeah, yes, so definitely everybody would at least heard about it, if not seen it or experienced it. Like I'm not a big time Star Wars guy, Professor, but I do. I am a. I'm sure I mentioned, Professor. I did books. I know. I have my own podcast and all that. Obviously, I talk a lot. So Star Wars, I like it, Professor, because it has that mythology. It has so many characters. There's always something for everyone.
There's a lot of
Uh,
technology in there.
Yes, so you can maybe like when I was younger, I was thinking about all those fast spaceships and cool lightsaber battles. But when I get older, I'm thinking about responsibility, life, death, relationships, family values, whatnot. So there's something there, Star Wars, as you grow older, younger, and so on. Now that is like an ecosystem, so everybody can relate to it. So a lot of times, no matter where you go, even in India, even sometimes in villages, if I show them like a photo of Darth Vader or lightsaber, people are like, "Hey, I've seen her somewhere." So that recognition is there. So similarly, Professor, when we talk about front end development or any kind of development, the ecosystem does make it really, really important to become part of this. So what happens with AngularJS is it uses the standard um, recognizable ecosystem things which are found in other frameworks as well, which makes it easy for you to jump into AngularJS development, even if you are already a developer in some other coding system. So for example, a lot of frameworks use modules. We have modules in AngularJS as well. We use components, again, available in AngularJS services and routing. Common thing that happens in all sorts of framework development, including Angular JS as well. In fact, what I like about the AngularJS ecosystem is it comes with what is called as an Angular CLI, Professor. It's like a command line utility, which we'll see in future session. It makes generation of the services and routings and components pretty straightforward. So that way, you still have, in the previous slide, I talked about this thing called as separates concern. So we use the word separation of concern there. So that part of the um, project maintenance or file maintenance is something which is automatically taken care of. So this is another thing I like about AngularJS. When I work on AngularJS project, I like how everything gets automatically sorted, making my life just that much easier, and so allowing me to focus on coding. And of course, Professor, as I mentioned in previous sessions, I am very much extensively using AI in all my projects now. And obviously, even the clients are expecting that to happen, because what would take 10 hours is now being done in 2 or 3 hours. So this kind of organized ecosystem makes it easy for newcomers, especially, and obviously old hat like me, to become even better at AngularJS development. So that's what I mean here when I say the AngularJS ecosystem has the expected things, nothing fancy. It's there in other frameworks as well, but how you use it, it's very organized, it's very automated. So that part is already there. Now, moving on to the finally, why would I go to the choose AngularJS? But I'm pretty sure if I'm talking about advantages, I would have put a slide on limitations of AngularJS as well. So let me first talk about the limitations of AngularJS before I dive into the advantages. The first thing here, Professor, is I must mention that it does have a fairly steep learning curve. And because I can think of, for me, it doesn't seem like a learning curve which is steep or something. So I myself, I don't agree with this, but still, I'm going to put that. I know put that in the slide. I mean, I did put it there mainly based on feedback from my students. But then again, every framework, every kind of coding will come with its own steep learning curve. So what do we mean by the steep learning curve in the context of AngularJS? The first thing, yes, you must already be fairly good in JavaScript. So we've been talking about JavaScript essentials, and now we moved on to frameworks for almost 10 sessions now. So that's almost a year now. So hopefully those who are following along with me, you've done your homework. Hopefully you have, and you have put in the necessary foundation framework knowledge on the JavaScript. So JavaScript learning itself can be a steep learning curve. Second thing, now AngularJS, Professor, it borrows heavily a lot of things from .NET. For example, in the previous slide, we talked about stuff like dependency injection. We talked about things like two-way data binding. And obviously, we talked about things like MVVM architecture. Now, in .NET, we do have something called as WPF. It's still there, but it's not that widely used. A lot of these things are similar to the WPF technology that was very much prevalent back in the 2010s, 2012s, 2015. So which means that's another learning curve for you. Because if you're already a .NET developer, with for example me, now for someone like me, it was very easy. It is very easy for me to kind of graduate or move and start using AngularJS right away. However, if you are new to coding itself, then obviously you are going to be new to .NET, or you may not even know .NET. And now you might be thinking, why does he mention .NET all the time? This is a JavaScript thing. So that's another thing, Professor. There's no escaping these things. So this is ultimately a front-end framework what we're talking about now. When we start building AngularJS, which is what we are going to do in the next session, we need to have a backend to support the front end. And for the purpose of this class, and today I'm going to show it, even if I'm not able to run it due to lack of time, the backend is being built using .NET. So that's how it always works. Front end, backend, backend, front end. Like the tennis match thing I was talking about. There are two tennis players, the front end and the back end. Front end is AngularJS, back end is .NET. A lot of times what happens is, so you'll have to, if you already have some prior experience, then that makes your learning easy. But otherwise, you are gonna end up learning all these things, especially these things, data binding, especially two-way data binding, dependency injection, that can take quite a while to understand what's going on. And finally, the entire MVVM architecture, like how to write models, how to import models, how to export models, how to inject things, how to design interfaces. All these things can be quite a lot of things to learn, especially if you are a first-time developer. So that's what I mean by steep learning curve. There's no escaping it. But then again, I'm going to talk about the advantages. And I already spoken about AngularJS for so long. So it is worth it though. Now, the next problem with AngularJS is, now this is a common problem with MVVM architecture. Now, I have worked on that WPF thing I was talking about in my younger days. It's not there anymore, but that technology was very much prevalent, 10 years ago and so on. In fact, I did do a lot of projects on that back then, even training on that thing back then. The MVVM architecture is very good for small-sized applications, medium-sized applications, but the moment you start exceeding that medium size and going to large size, it does have performance limitations because of the way, the fundamental way it is designed. It kind of becomes heavy. It cannot deal with too many users and so on. So that's what we really mean when we say large scale application. So let's say a small scale application could be maybe 5,000 or 10,000 users. A medium scale application would be maybe 50,000 users or 100,000 users. But a large scale application would be something like 500,000 users, million users and about. So yes, and of course it doesn't mean it's impossible. A lot of AngularJS applications are built for large scale purposes, but that means a lot of time has to be spent by the developer team optimizing their code to make it faster and faster and faster. But eventually you'll hit a certain point, like a limit, after which no more improvements can be done and the application will begin to drag. Of course, the solutions could be obvious. It's easier to just break up the big application, convert that into smaller application, but that may not always be practical. So that is something to keep in mind. Now, this is a significant problem with AngularJS, but at the end of the day, a lot of software, I've been involved in a lot of software projects. Even right now, I'm doing a couple of projects for a client of mine. That's where I'm traveling right now and all that. A lot of times performance is not a problem. I do a lot of testing enterprise applications, some slowness or something else, not an issue really. So yeah, in those cases, their focus would be on reliability, their focus would be on ease of development, their focus would be on ease of maintenance. So not every project needs to have lightning speed in terms of reaction time and things like that. So depending on the priorities, Angular just gives you, you'll see the advantages here. It gives you reliable software, and a lot of time that takes for priority over performance issues. And finally, AngularJS is designed for complex web app development. So which means smaller apps, they don't need all these things. A simple example I can think of is AngularJS uses something called TypeScript, Professor. I mentioned this occasionally in all my sessions, but I never really went deep into it. But now that we are starting the world of AngularJS, we may have to start looking into that. So just using TypeScript itself can be problematic for a lot of developers. And in a lot of smaller apps, people don't even use TypeScript. So there you go. That's one example of something which is not needed in small apps, but it is there by default in AngularJS, and it is highly recommended that we use TypeScript when you're developing in AngularJS. So that's one instance of overhead from features that are not required in small apps. And that's the main limitations with AngularJS. So that's the negative thing. So, but now I'm going to move on to the advantages of AngularJS. Okay, first thing is strong support for real-time application. So just like we discussed before with the two-way data binding, so and the MEV architecture. So what it does is almost every website you use today is usually real time. Things happen live in front of you and the data gets updated. A simple example is a Zoom call right now. So I am talking to you and you are able to see me almost live. I mean, sure, there's some delay because of the internet and things like that. I do something here on the screen. Like again, I go left, I go right, I click here, I move the cursor and all that. So again, all of that is being updated immediately. So that's what we mean by real-time applications. And this is something which is really, really important in a lot of software, especially web apps, where you want real-time data being updated. Another example I can think of is like I'm pretty much a huge fan of Formula One. Like again, there was a race yesterday. It was the U.S. Grand Prix or Miami Grand Prix, if I'm not wrong, and I believe Verstappen, who I support, he came fourth. So again, if I'm not able to watch the sport live, I go to the website, the race timing, the location of the cars, driver statistics, everything keeps getting updated live on the website. So again, stuff like that is real-time application. So if you're building web apps where reflecting real-time data, which is almost every web app, if you ask me, again, AngularJS is the best framework to choose. The second thing is what really made me choose AngularJS for our session series, community and documentation. Now, why is that so important? Now, first thing is, although the latest version of AngularJS is Angular 19, in my projects, including the current project I'm working on here, I mentioned I'm traveling. You can see I'm traveling and I'm staying in a rented apartment. It's not my home. It's not my home office. If you check my previous videos, we are using AngularJS, which is the current major version that we are using in a lot of our projects. And the reason for this, and in general, Angular, is that it's been around for a really, really long time. At least 10 to 12 years, I would say. I mean, Angular version 16, so now it's 19. So definitely at least 15 years or old. So yeah, it has been there for a really, really long time. And when you are jumping into a framework, it's like choosing a partner in your coding adventure. So you want a framework that has been there for a really, really long time. The longer a framework is going to be around, the more people have used it, the more bugs have been fixed, the more features have been added, and obviously it would be documented a lot. And this is even more important right now because, again, going back to the AI thing, with AI powered tools, the older a framework is, the AI models, they have had more data to like analyze and crunch and understand. So when you start using AI for your development of front end, you can be sure that okay, the AI will help you much better with something like AngularJS than with another framework which is maybe new and doesn't have a bigger community. So as much as possible, when you're choosing a framework, and not just framework, if you're planning to learn a new programming language, at least in the beginning, you should choose a programming language which is really popular. Simply because the more popular it is, there is more discussion about it, there is more documentation about it, and that means the AI knows much more about it. So that definitely applies for AngularJS. And for me, point number two, extensive community and documentation about AngularJS, and that means incredible support from any AI model. We already did a session on AI, so you can go back and watch about it on how we can use AI and stuff like that. But yeah, that was really the game changer for me. That is why I chose AngularJS for this series, and obviously in the next few sessions and so on. Next thing is, of course, this is pretty standard. It's not like unique to AngularJS or something. There are built-in tools for unit testing and debugging, both the things that I've talked about in the previous session. So I'll not go too deep into it. And finally, obviously, enhance productivity two-way binding in directives. So this is like kind of specific to AngularJS, because AngularJS is one of, I mean, at least as far as I know, AngularJS is the only framework that uses this two-way data binding system. Other frameworks like React, they use a different technology, but Angular uses the two-way data binding. So this is good because it makes it really easy to build real-time application. But as I mentioned in the disadvantage section, as the project becomes big, like I'm talking large scale, like millions of users, then there will be some performance issues. But again, as I mentioned, it's very reliable. So companies usually make a trade-off, and they're like, okay, it's fine. We'll deal with some performance issues, not a problem. So those are the main advantages of AngularJS. And yeah, that is what I want to say about the AngularJS limitations as well as advantages. And finally, the use cases, really, guys, AngularJS, we are going to use it. I have a demo project. We are going to build like a logging system. Now, that is the use case for me. But again, use case for AngularJS is any kind of front-end web app you're thinking of. You could probably build that with AngularJS. But then again, nothing unique about this, because at this point, the whole front-end frameworks things have become so standardized. The use cases for AngularJS will equally apply to React.js and then Vue.js or any other front-end framework, really. So the use cases you see here, like building large-scale enterprise applications, for example, when you think about enterprise, Dr. Watson works for university, so I'm sure they have like a employee management software, they may have leave management software, they may have library management software, they'll probably have fees management and stuff like that. So all these things count as large scale enterprise applications. So those stuff like that can be built with AngularJS. And of course, real-time applications like dashboard, like I talked about the Formula One thing, and chat application, like the whole Zoom thing that we're talking about. So again, a lot of libraries are available for real-time manipulation of data. And finally, complex forms and dynamic data, same thing as the item number 1 and 2, definitely the ideal use case for AngularJS. So ultimately, any kind of modern web app, whatever you can think of, that would be an appropriate application use case for Angular JS. So now here, okay. So I've reached the summary page, but I realize now that because I wanted to move away from Next.js, I actually removed it after putting it in my PowerPoint slide. So as I summarize AngularJS, I'm also going to just mention Next.js. So originally, that is why it's there in the title. So I want to kind of take this opportunity to say goodbye to Next.js. And this, I don't know if anybody's still there from the very first session. I don't know if Dr. Walson was there. I'm not sure Professor Walson was there in the first session, but either way, Professor Walson. So a year ago, Professor, that's when we started this. I still remember talking about this 14 months ago, and then the session started 2 months later. At that point, the AI thing hadn't hit its peak like it has right now. Second, I originally wanted this to go in the direction of what is called as Next.js. But as the months went by, Professor, I realized Next.js actually involves or expects people to learn backend, then people to learn React.js. Then that became too complex for the beginner level series that we are doing here. So as time went by, I started doing research, and eventually I decided to push out Next.js. That's why it's still there in the title, but we're kind of going away from that. And I replaced that with AngularJS. And the reasons are right there, which I've discussed in the last 40 minutes. And before I wrap up, a quick summary of the AngularJS. So first up, forget about Next.js for now. It's too complex for an entry-level series. AngularJS is the best framework that I am going to recommend. That is what is going to happen in the future sessions. I'll be walking you through each and every feature of AngularJS, and we'll be building a nice AngularJS front end. I'm not sure I will be able to show the demo today, but I will show the demo in the next session. But yes, AngularJS is where we are going to be in terms of building our single page application. Now, it is extremely suitable, the Angular framework, for building everything from small scale apps to complex large scale applications. Yes, it will have some problems in enterprise level, usage, but we don't have to worry about it. At the end of the day, we are trying to be student developers and hobby level developers or intern level developers. So AngularJS is not going to create any kind of problems there. And as I mentioned, it has all the features needed for a developer. It has a steep learning curve, but then again, almost every other framework has a steep learning curve. So you can't escape from it. In fact, the original plan was Next.js, and I realized compared to that, this one obviously has a easier. I'm sorry, Professor, I'm talking too much. I'm going to get some water, sir.
Yes, yeah, you're doing a superb job, and it
I, I
happens
I don't
indeed.
realize I need to take a break sometimes, Professor.
Yes, yes. Ladies and gentlemen, again, this is Atlantic International University with a live class session on the topic of Angular JavaScript. Go
Yes,
ahead.
I'm back, Professor. Thank you
Okay.
for filling the dead air there, Sir Professor. I appreciate it. So here, folks, I do have this project demo. Now, the project demo is fairly complex, but it is really the simplest project I could come up with, especially for this session. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make I'll just show you. It doesn't run yet because that is something I'm going to do in the next session. But what I really want to do is the zoom bar is blocking it. There you go. I have gone ahead and mentioned this link here. Yes, at the top, this link, I'm going to put it in the chat. But again, that PDF I shared with you, I'll share again before the session gets over. There we go. I'm going to put this link in the chat for everyone. There you go, folks. So please make a note of it. Remember, the Zoom chat does not stay after the Zoom call is over. So please make a note of that link. I'll be sending the PDF again, which also has that link. This is going to be our project. This is going to be our project, yours and mine for the next few sessions. We are going to go ahead and build this project. Now here, as I mentioned, let me just zoom in a little bit. Professor, is it zooming in? It's not. I am. Oh, there you go. Okay. There we go. Okay. All right.
Now we can see it clearly.
Yes, Professor. So now you'll see that, as I mentioned, from now on, there's always going to be two projects. There's going to be a backend. That's what I call the web API, which you can see here. And then the front end, which is the web app, which you can see here. So we have the backend and the front end. So from now on, you have to start thinking of it in terms of backend and front end, because yes, you can build front end only, but ultimately, as you saw in the presentation today, the purpose of a front end is to show data, and that data has to come from somewhere. So if you just build front end on its own, that wouldn't be worth much. Imagine a restaurant which is like really, really fancy, like great seats, air conditioning, good looking waiters and waitresses and all that, but there is no kitchen.
No food.
So, I mean, you go there, all you get are Skittles and chocolates, and sure, you'll sit there for maybe even half an hour or something, but eventually you are still hungry. No amount of good looks can fill your stomach. So you're going to walk out. So that's what happens. A lot of time front end development, if you just do it on your own without a back end, it's not going to fly. So what we're going to do is I have a backend ready here, and you can see here, it's something which I keep updating, adding new features, by fixing bugs and so on. So I do keep it updated on a regular basis. So it is regularly updated. So there you go, folks. This is what we are going to see in the next session. It has a front end and a back end. Now, I have shared the link with you. So if you are feeling adventurous, you can try to run it on your Windows computer, and I have put a link here. I just want to show that here. It's called documentation is available here. If you click on this, you'll see that I have given detailed steps on how to run this project. And this is something I'm going to do. As you can see, the steps just to run this is fairly complex. So we're going to do that in the next session. Obviously, the next session is going to be SQL. Of course, we are not staying to SQLs here. We've done a lot of SQL sessions in the past, so we're definitely going to do this as well. So it's fairly complex just to run it. So that's what we're going to do in the next session. But think of this like a trailer or a teaser. So you see if you can run it on your own before I do it for you in the next session. So that's what we are going to do in the future session. So that's where I am going to stop, Dr. Watson. I'm going to come back to my PowerPoint presentation here. And yes, sir, I now is where I'm going to take questions. Yes, sir. And don't worry if it goes a few minutes above, so you know that I don't stop you from asking extra questions.
Yes. Brothers and sisters, I want to thank you again for your attendance. I do realize that you were very attentive to get all the points made by our SME J. Vijaya Simha from India. I did announce in my introduction that it was going to be thoroughly very technical in nature, but fortunately, our J, our professor, our presenter, demonstrated his ability to deliver the presentation, as you realize, in a kind of down-to-earth fashion, so to speak, to ensure that you could grab the content in a meaningful manner. As a matter of fact, he did announce that in the next sessions are going to be more hands-on. In the chat box, you can see the PDF document. You can be somewhat proactive about the next sessions by going into that document and do some homework so that you can understand how the demo is going to fly and wow. Professor J. Thank you very much. The first question is ready, and that's going to be with Show Alpha.
Dr. Watson, we had a question in the middle of the session, so if you remember, I thought we should answer that first before we...
Yes, but let's go first.
Okay.
Attendee has hands up, and then we will go back to that question that I read originally. Fagay, go ahead.
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I just want to say the frameworks enhance the quality of the coding for different frames. That's my question. Like, is there difference if I use a framework like this one, Angular?
Yes. So what happens is there is a way to develop software without using frameworks. We call them vanilla JS, where there's no framework being used. Now, what happens then is that you will have to decide as a developer to come up with your own way for everything, how to organize the files, where to keep what, where to put the services, what packages to use, how to deploy it. So ultimately, it's like trying to make your own pizza. Like you're literally making everything, your own dough, your own toppings, your own style, everything, which is fine, if you're just learning things. But ultimately, you'll reach a point where you're either applying for a job or preparing to do something for yourself as a hobby and so on. And when that happens, you do want to work in a team. You have to become part of your company, or you have to get ready for a university project, and you need to have that standardization. So from that perspective, yes, framework is literally the only way we can build modern software, because 30 years ago, sure, everything was simple, but now things are so complex. Each and every little detail can become on itself a monumental task. For example, the login registration stuff that you see on websites, a lot of effort goes into making sure the work is expected. So if you don't use a framework, even doing that simple login registration thing can be hundreds of hours of effort. And even after all that, it might come undone because it was built by you on yourself. So if you use a framework, what happens? There'll be a specific way where you can take a proper industry standard authentication library, inject it into your project because you're using a framework, and then actually focus on building your software instead of worrying if login is going to work or it's going to break down and so on and so forth. So yes, to answer your question, yes, using a framework is not only make the whole thing better, it is in almost every case a mandatory and essential thing. Any framework, in our case, I'm choosing Angular. Whatever framework you choose, it is essentially you choose one.